Well, hello, and welcome to my extremely cramped garage here. I moved into a new home and still in the process of doing some renovations and moving some things around. But considering the time of the year, we're falling into the time of this recording here in the middle of late November, and weather's turning. It's getting colder, but it's still rideable. Still ride your bike in it, provided you manage your heat, your clothing, and your wind protection for me. So what I've done is I've decided to do a video here on windshields, aftermarket windshields in particular. The R1200RT comes stock with a reasonably competent windshield. But if you own one of these and you speak with other owners, either online or in person, one of the first things they change is the windshield. The second thing they change, of course, is the seat, or they make modifications to the seat. And I thought I'd do a video on windshields. Now, I ran briefly this summer with the stock windshield, but doing some long distance riding. Long distance for me, as I've mentioned before, is anything in excess of 8 hours straight on the bike, with stops only for fuel and water. So at that point, you start realizing, well, you want to make the bike as comfortable as possible. Comfort for me is low wind noise, moderate wind protection. I don't want to be completely encapsulated from the wind, because riding a motorcycle has, in my opinion, has to have some wind on you. But what I thought was I would improve primarily the noise. In other words, how much wind hits my face shield and buffeting wind. And when it's really cold outside like it is now, you do want more wind protection, generally speaking. You want a little bit of wind and air, but you want more wind protection just to stay warm. After riding a brief period with the stock windshield, I decided to upgrade. At the time I upgraded, there was really only one really popular windshield for the water-cooled RT, and that was the windshield offered by Werks. It was called the Werks Quiet Ride, and I believe there's a couple sizes you could order and a couple tints you could order. You could order a tintless, or you could order one with this minor tint. So I ordered the medium height minor tint. Now the Werks Quiet Ride has a flare on it, or a kick at the top, and that's designed to throw some wind up over your head. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, primarily my K1600 video where I upgraded to an Aeroflow windshield, I mentioned that these kicks do cause turbulence, but ideally they throw the air up, that turbulent flow up high enough up over your helmet that you don't hear or feel the turbulence. Because turbulence on a helmet is very noisy. For me especially, it's almost like somebody banging a drum onto your helmet. It's that noisy. And that can become worse than just regular old white noise. Now, there's riders out there that prefer white noise. In other words, they prefer no windshield protection. They like the straight, clean air hitting their helmet. And although it's loud, it's consistently loud. And if you can deal with that with earplugs or with deafness, you're okay with that. I prefer, because I do ride in colder climates, I prefer wind protection without the noise. So for me, I do like wind protection. That's part of the reason I went to a touring bike. Anyway, after installing the Werks Quiet Ride, I ran a couple runs with it. I did like it, and I've assessed it in my own mind. And I was getting ready to do a video on it as we come into the fall here with a busy summer. But what happened was, in preparation for this video, I was contacted by Aeroflow to try one of their windshields. So I'm doing that. I'm actually trying one of their windshields in two heights, the standard height and the extended height, or the large height. And I'll do the comparison here in just a moment of the size. But I've tried both of them, and I've also received in the package the Aeroflow wings, which I'm going to do or Aero wings rather, which I'm going to do in another video. I thought it important to point out the difference in the profiles of these windshields. Here on the floor of my garage is the stock windshield, and as you can see, it is concave at the top. Laying on top of it now is the Werks Quiet Ride, and down below the waist, profile's the same, but above the waist at its widest point, it broadens out about 1.5 inches to 2 inches wider than stock, and then curves upward at the top where the flare is.
And then next up are the two Aeroflow windshields, which are a little shorter at the bottom, but are broader in the waist and taller on top, medium and the tall, as you can see. So they're equally spaced apart in height at the top of the screen. So, for comparison purposes, here is the bike head-on with the stock windshield on it. Now I wanted to show everybody just how high the windshield sits in its lowest position and just how high it goes in its highest position. Now, as I will mention later in the video, the turbulence is minimal at lowest position, although you get a lot of wind over the top of the shield, and the turbulence increases as you raise it up until its highest position, where the windshield blows enough over top that it's not so bad. Here next up is the Werks Quiet Ride. Now you will notice right off the bat when these two photos are held side by side that the Werks is almost identical in average height at its lowest position to stock. And here it is going up. Now, I tried to show here as it's going back down roughly where I like to keep it, which is about just below my mouth here, I guess. That's the ideal height at cruising speed on the highway. So about 4/10 of the way up, 40% of the way up. Now here is the first of the Aeroflow windshields. Since the waist of the Aeroflow is wider than the stock and the Werks, it has to curve back in towards the top of the windshield. But it is interesting to note that with all of the flared windshields, they have a top profile that is comparable, almost similar, almost identical, I guess, to each other. And you'll notice the Aeroflow goes up that much higher, almost to the brim of my hat. And finally is the Aeroflow Tall. Now this particular windshield is very tall even at its lowest position, almost up to my, I guess just above my mouth here in this picture, almost to my nose. So when you put it up all the way, it almost goes, well, to the top of my hat in this video. And at that height on the highway, there's very little wind that touches you, let alone buffeting. And I like to ride with that one just about at my mouth height, which is about an inch or so up. Now this next shot is the stock windshield in the upper left-hand corner, the Werks windshield in the upper right-hand corner, and on the lower left and lower right are the Aeroflow medium and tall windshields respectively, just to show side profile in lowest position and highest position of the windshields. All windshields look fine on the bike in my opinion. Now, in preparation for this comparison, I had to determine a good driving circuit, one that included a few slow speed roads and twisty roads, and a lot of roads where I'm able to pick up the speed a little bit, drive either around other vehicles, following other vehicles, or all by myself on the highway. So I did that. The total circuit I was driving this particular day, which I tried with all four windshields, including the stock obviously, was a total of about 20 miles, so about 40 kilometers. And that included some high-speed runs, or relatively high-speed runs within reason. And I tried up and down the highway alone and with a passenger at varying heights, adjusting the windshield to varying heights to get a good idea of how well each one performed and handled turbulence. Now, I borrowed this GoPro, and in the process, I learned a little bit about them. They have a built-in microphone in the camera, so a lot of the buffeting that you're hearing is actually a little louder than what I would hear inside the helmet. So it's a really good assessment if you watch the height of the windshield in these clips closely and how much noise is coming over to hit the camera. It's a good assessment as to how well the windshield is performing. Here, as it goes up, you hear the noise go down, and then as I drop the windshield, again the noise goes back up again, all the way down. Now, this particular windshield that I recorded was the run I did with the medium height Aeroflow, and it performed quite well, obviously, as you can see. We are very pleased. We did a few runs later this day with the Aeroflow Tall, and we had the radio on and turned up, and we compared the volume levels to what we normally run with, and we were pleasantly surprised of how much noise is cut down from wind in order to allow us to listen to the radio. Now, it's also important to note that the circuit I ran in both directions. So I left my home, I drove up, out, and onto the highway, and then back again. So if the wind was blowing in one direction, it helped us better judge the performance of the shield.
So how did they perform? Well, we'll start with the stock as our baseline. Stock windshield has turbulence at just about every level except full up. So all the way up you get almost zero turbulence, but anywhere south of full up, any lower position, there's turbulence to some degree on the helmet. At its lower level, it actually is fairly clean. It's slight turbulent air, but a lot of wind comes over the top of the windshield, spills over top, and you get a lot in your face. It's noisy, and if it's cold outside, it's cold. Okay, so as you raise the windshield, there's turbulence slowly increases. Okay, but you still get a lot of wind. And halfway up, you're still looking over top of the windshield, or just about looking over top of the windshield. A lot of turbulence and a lot of air coming over the top. Now, the size of the stock windshield is the smallest of the bunch, and it actually looks the sportiest of the bunch, believe it or not. It has no tint to it. The optical clarity is very good. And it, in the summertime now, if you're driving on a slow city road, or if you drive slow country roads, it's a great choice. So, as a footnote to the stock windshield, if I were to upgrade any windshield, I would definitely keep the stock windshield. I mean, it's not worth much to anybody else that doesn't have these, and if they already have one of these, they'd have a stock windshield themselves. So it's something you'd keep. It's not something you should discard or dispose of. Keep it as an option. These windshields change out in minutes, not even minutes. In 1 minute, you could change this windshield. So it's keeping the stock windshield is a great hot summertime option or slow speed summertime option. Now, the Werks Quiet Ride is a very good aftermarket windshield. It has a flare here, as you can see, and I know you've seen earlier in the video. Has a compound flare here on the side too, so that's kind of nice. And it's got a tint to it. It has a nice color to it. Actually, it matches the bike quite well. It's a dark on the edge, almost deep dark brownish black gold color, and it matches the bike very nice. Optically, it's very good. Werks claims that there's no distortion. Well, there's a slight bit of distortion in the flare area, but I would expect that. And quite honestly, the idea is with these flared windshields is you look over top of them, which is by far, in my opinion, the best way to manage airs, to make sure you're looking over top of the windshield. The Werks, I find, works best, pardon the pun, about halfway to 40 to 50% of up when you're on the highway at cruising speed. So it manages, there's a slight bit of turbulence that comes over top, so the odd pop will hit your helmet. All the way up, you still get, believe it or not, a slight bit of the odd pop of turbulence. It's reduced, but there's very little difference in wind from 40% up to 100% fully up on the shield on the windshield when it's up on the bike. So it's most effective for the raise, I guess, at 40%. Above that, you don't get an increase in effectiveness in wind management. So it works best for me at about 40% up, or all the way down if you're driving slow. Now, because of the flare all the way down, you do get turbulence, far more turbulence than the stock windshield. So that's something to keep in mind too. Between this and the Aeroflows, for example, it has almost identical flare profile at the top here. You can line all three of them up and they're almost identical. But it's a good choice, and it's a great windshield. It looks good. And I do like it, like I say, at about 40% up and no higher. No need to go higher because it does make a difference. So the Aeroflow Medium is just one step taller than the Werks Quiet Ride. I don't know, about 2 inches, I guess. But generally speaking, it's sort of side profiles almost identical, but it's wider on the wings, the two waist areas, which I've shown earlier in the video. And it does a better job at its lowest position, at its cruising position than the Werks does. So what you'll do is, let's say you would, for me, I can ride with this one at about 20 to 30% fully extended versus 100, I guess. So about 20 to 30% ride height on the electric lift. And it does a really good job. It reduces the turbulence down to almost zero. And then when you put it all the way up, there's no turbulence, or very, very little. So I rate my turbulence as how often do I get a pop or a little pop against my my helmet as I'm riding. So 20 to 30% up, you're good. And or I guess 3 or 4 inches, I guess, is the best way to look at that. And then if you put it all the way up, it reduces it down further. So it's more effective as you raise it. But it does a great job. Nice windshield. Now, performance-wise, though, the Aeroflow Tall did the best job of all. At its lowest setting, below 60 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour, thereabouts, it actually has very little turbulence at its lowest setting. And at 80 miles an hour, 140 kilometers an hour, you have to put it up maybe 1.5 inches, and it takes almost all the turbulence off your helmet completely. And also for your passenger, it tends to do a better job for your passenger, which I didn't discuss on the other two. The Werks, Quiet Ride, for the passenger, you notice as you put the windshield up, it doesn't make a huge difference for you, but you have to put the windshield up for my passenger, who's about 5'6". For her, it has to be up about another 3 or 4 inches to make the difference for her. So you're just peeking over the top of it where she starts to notice a reduction in turbulence. And that extra raise is less pronounced on the Aeroflow Medium. So on the Aeroflow Medium, you have to put it up maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches before she starts to see the reduction in turbulence. Than if you're riding alone, for example. The Aeroflow Tall, even less so. So on the highway, as I was about to say, at about 140 kilometers an hour, about 85 miles an hour, it's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches from this lowest setting that you have to put it up to get almost zero turbulence. And then all the way up, there's nothing. So we rode 10 or 15 miles or 15 or 25 kilometers, I can't remember how far, without one pop of turbulence at that speed all the way up. Just to compare, so there's zero turbulence all the way up, basically forever. And my passenger noticed the same thing. So about 1 inch to 1.5 inches up at about on the highway speeds is all you'd ever need at just about any highway speed, reasonable highway speed, and maybe another 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch up for my passenger for her to get complete sort of turbulence-free ride. Now, back to that. I just want it, that inch and a half up is not completely turbulent free. You will get the odd pop every minute, a little puff of air, but it's very, very good. And the beauty of it is, I can actually hear the stereo better through the stock speakers with this windshield. So it tends to kick air out around my body better as well. Now there'll be a follow-up video to this on the Aeroflow wings. I'm going to show how to install them and test their effectiveness. But just for the sake of this video, this windshield would be my choice between these three, simply because it is a tall windshield, and it's a touring, in my opinion, I'll use the term touring windshield, so it's better if you're doing long distance riding, and it's also better in cold or inclement weather. Just does a better job, simply put, for me and my passenger. Now the color of this and the other Aeroflow windshield, it almost has a bluish tinge to it, so I'm assuming that has something to do with the material it's made out of. That doesn't bother me at all. The Werks has a little nicer color, if you're into aesthetics. But as far as effectiveness, this one does the best job. And it's wide, it's broad, it's a good long distance touring windshield. And I think for me, my solution is going to be to use this windshield and keep my stock windshield for the really, really hot short ride summer days. I can pop them off and on real quick, and I'm good to go. Optically, the Aeroflows, and I didn't mention this in the last, just a moment ago with the other Aeroflow windshield, optically they're very good. I don't have any problems with them. But just as an aside, and I think the way this works is these windshields that I've tested are all incrementally taller. So the Werks Quiet Ride being the shortest, the Aeroflow Medium being in between, medium, and the Aeroflow Tall being the tallest, and they're almost equally distance in height from each other. The back pressure, which I did not discuss did not mention the other two, the back pressure is not overwhelming with the Aeroflows, and I spoke to the folks at Aeroflow about this, and they claim the bottom profile is cut up a little bit to allow some air to come underneath the front of the windshield when it's raised, to reduce the vacuum that begins to exist as you raise a windshield behind the dash here. So they allow more air in underneath and to reduce that back pressure, and it does a great job. Back pressure on any one of these windshields is not a problem. Stock is actually the best. You feel almost zero back pressure. I do. You can just start to feel it, to notice it with the other three, depending on how high you put them up. But once you have the shield on for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, that back pressure becomes not noticeable. I have ridden in the past with other motorcycles with back pressure that's so strong it became fatiguing, and that's a problem. In the olden days, 20 years ago, we used to cut holes, small holes in the front of these touring windshields to let air through. But now with the way these folks do it, they spend a little more time designing them, and they design back pressure reduction right into the shield itself. So this is a wonderful shield, and if you're tired of getting noise and wind and cold in your helmet, and your helmet's naturally loud, or maybe it isn't loud, you just don't like that blustery noise, these windshields would be a great choice for you. For me, as I mentioned, this is the one I'm going to go with, the Aeroflow Tall, because I have zero tolerance for noise now at my age. So anyway, until next time.